How did a container ship docking quietly at Port Houston spark one of the largest chemical seizures in U.S. history? On June 2, 2025, ICE and CBP agents intercepted 50,000 kilograms of methamphetamine precursors, industrial chemicals capable of fueling billions of dollars in narcotics production hidden in cargo marked as industrial disinfectant. The operation codenamed Iron River was not just another drug bust. It revealed a sophisticated global logistics network linking Chinese suppliers, cartel chemists in Sinaloa, and shell corporations across Southeast Asia. Federal investigators now believe the chemicals were intended for massive conversion labs operating in northern Mexico, just miles from the US border. Sources close to the investigation told Reuters that the seizure stemmed from 6 months of interagency tracking supported by maritime data analytics and AI-based cargo risk profiling. The chemical composition matched precursors from Chinese ports previously flagged by the DEA in joint operations since 2023. What stunned officials most was not the scale, but the precision. The containers moved through legitimate trade corridors, using falsified manifests cleared by a Hong Kong-based intermediary registered under a Singapore address. Under the current Trump administration, border and customs enforcement budgets have increased by over 30%, emphasizing maritime choke points and chemical interdiction. Trump's Chemical Shield initiative, launched in early 2025, expanded HSI's ability to track synthetic narcotic supply chains through real-time customs data sharing with allied nations. Analysts at Jane's Defense Weekly note that such policy pressure has begun shifting cartel logistics from traditional smuggling toward industrial infiltration using global shipping systems as Trojan horses. Investigators suspect the chemicals originated from state-affiliated chemical plants in China's Guangdong province, known for dual-use exports. While Beijing officially denies any state involvement, a BBC News analysis highlights how lax regulatory enforcement has enabled rogue exporters to feed the global meth trade. Similar seizures were documented in ports from the Philippines to Chile earlier this year, showing a synchronized trafficking model built on disguised industrial shipments. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security released a statement emphasizing that this bust prevented enough precursor material to produce an estimated 25,000 kilograms of crystal meth, an unprecedented volume that could have fueled cartel operations for months. Former DEA Field Director James Todd, speaking to Defense News, warned, "We are witnessing the industrialization of narcotics. These aren't street-level smuggling rings, they're multinational corporations of crime." The scale of the operation raises pressing questions. If one shipment could slip so far into the American supply chain, how many others have gone undetected? And could this be just one arm of a broader chemical warfare-style strategy by cartels to destabilize U.S. border states? The unraveling of the China-Sinaloa chemical supply chain exposed how transnational crime has evolved beyond the reach of conventional border enforcement. The intercepted shipment in Houston was not a one-off event. It was part of an elaborate logistical ballet designed to exploit global trade systems. According to data compiled by Al Jazeera and DW, more than a dozen similar containers have been traced over the past year to front companies in Shenzhen, Xiamen, and Fuzhou, each tied to the same network of shell entities laundering payments through cryptocurrency and offshore accounts in Panama and Belize. At the center of this structure sits a well-documented cooperation between Chinese chemical brokers and Sinaloa Cartel logisticians operating under what U.S. analysts now call industrial camouflage. Instead of shipping finished methamphetamine, the cartels have shifted toward importing industrial precursors like ephedrine derivatives, formamide, and red phosphorus, which can be transformed into meth at decentralized laboratories across northern Mexico. These chemicals are mislabeled under customs codes for disinfectants, fertilizers, or medical solvents, a tactic that has repeatedly fooled basic customs algorithms. Maritime analysts cited by Reuters explain that the supply chain was optimized through third-party logistics hubs in Malaysia and Vietnam using re-export certificates to disguise the true origin. The cartels have built redundancy into their logistics, said retired Navy intelligence officer Carl Donovan. If one container is caught, 5 others arrive through different ports. His remark underscores the growing resilience of these networks, an evolution that mirrors military-style decentralization tactics used by insurgent organizations. The Sinaloa Cartel's adaptation represents a strategic shift toward industrial-scale production that resembles legitimate manufacturing. Satellite images reviewed by BBC's investigative team show newly built chemical storage depots in Sonora and Sinaloa, large enough to house tens of thousands of liters of precursor fluid. These facilities mimic fertilizer plants, but are equipped with ventilation and temperature control systems tailored for chemical synthesis, a sign of corporate-level investment in narcotics infrastructure. Western countermeasures counter-narcotics experts view this industrial pivot as an echo of the arms race logic seen in warfare. Each enforcement measure by U.S. agencies drives traffickers to adopt more sophisticated countermeasures. The network's logistics are now supported by former maritime engineers, data scientists, and chemical technicians who work as contract specialists. Their expertise allows the cartels to operate with the efficiency of multinational corporations. One senior defense news analyst called it the militarization of organized crime. The strategic concern for Washington lies not only in the flow of methamphetamine, but also in the vulnerability of the global chemical supply chain. The same shipping routes are critical for U.S. pharmaceutical and industrial imports. As the Trump administration tightens port inspections and introduces AI-based tracking systems under Operation Deep Harbor, a pressing question remains: can legitimate commerce survive such scrutiny without crippling U.S. trade? If cartels are now mimicking state-level logistics and exploiting the same maritime channels used by global industries, then America's ports have effectively become the new front line in a hybrid war, one fought not with missiles but with molecules. The scale of this operation revealed a disturbing transformation: the industrialization of methamphetamine production on U.S. soil. For decades, the Sinaloa Cartel and its rivals relied on smuggling finished narcotics across the border. Now they are importing industrial capacity chemicals, lab components, and technicians to manufacture directly within reach of American consumers. Intelligence briefings reviewed by The Guardian indicate that at least 4 large-scale super labs were under construction in 2025 across Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, each capable of producing several tons of crystal meth monthly. According to DEA Forensic Division estimates, the seized 50,000 kilograms of precursors could have yielded up to 25 metric tons of meth worth over $2.4 billion at street value. The alarming part: only about 40% of the total supply chain was intercepted. The rest, experts warn, might have already reached clandestine facilities disguised as agricultural chemical warehouses in rural industrial parks. These ghost facilities operate under layers of false corporate registration. Leased under shell companies, they employ legitimate-looking staff to conduct fertilizer mixing or chemical blending while concealing high-volume synthesis equipment in insulated backrooms. Drone surveillance footage analyzed by Defense News shows nighttime activity delivery trucks arriving without headlights and heat signatures consistent with active chemical reactions. This industrialization represents a turning point. Instead of guerrilla-style smuggling, the cartels are embedding their operations within legitimate economic ecosystems. They are investing in automation, chemical processing lines, and logistics software. The meth trade, once chaotic and improvised, is now a vertically integrated industry mirroring corporate manufacturing efficiency. It's the Ford Model T of narcotics, says Dr. Michael Benson, a counter-narcotics researcher at the University of Arizona. Mass production, streamlined logistics, globalized supply chains, all optimized for illegal profit. The impact on U.S. communities could be catastrophic. The CDC's 2025 Substance Abuse Report recorded a 22% surge in meth-related overdoses in the first quarter alone. Local hospitals in Texas and California have reported synthetic overloads cases where new meth variants contain unidentified additives that intensify dependency and neurotoxicity. Public health officials now warn of a potential chemical pandemic fueled by industrial purity levels reaching 95–97%. The Trump administration's response, Operation Chemical Shield, launched nationwide inspections of chemical importers and distributors. The DHS is deploying mobile forensic labs at major ports and rail hubs to detect precursor chemicals before they disperse inland. However, the sheer scale of global chemical trade, over 11 million containers entering the U.S. annually, makes complete prevention nearly impossible. As Reuters reported, for every seized ton, 5 may already be inside. The larger question haunting Washington is whether this evolution signifies something deeper: the blurring line between organized crime and state-tolerated export economies. Could foreign industrial zones be enabling cartel production in exchange for illicit revenue? And if so, can the United States protect its domestic chemical integrity without choking the arteries of global commerce that keep its industries alive? As Operation Chemical Shield unfolded, the scope of coordination behind the Houston seizure became evident. The operation drew together ICE, CBP, DHS, the DEA, and even naval intelligence elements stationed at Corpus Christi, forming one of the most complex joint chemical interdictions in recent years. The moment the cargo containers were flagged, a specialized hazmat team was deployed under strict containment protocol. According to Defense News, each barrel was scanned with Raman spectroscopy and chemical ionization detectors to identify precursor compounds without breaching their seals, a critical measure against accidental vapor release. The seized shipment contained three key precursors: pseudoephedrine hydrochloride, phenyl-2-propanone P2P, and methylamine, all essential for high-purity meth production. Chemical analysis later confirmed their concentration levels to be nearly identical to formulas used in known Sinaloa facilities. It was a perfect match, stated a DHS chemical forensics officer to Reuters, suggesting the cartel had received direct formulations from industrial chemists possibly trained abroad. What shocked analysts wasn't just the precision, but the sophistication. Every barrel carried electronic seals and falsified QR codes tied to legitimate Chinese manufacturers, implying access to compromised export data systems. The network behind this shipment appeared to possess not only the resources, but also the cyber capabilities to manipulate international logistics documentation. This was corporate-level infiltration, said former CBP Director Thomas Allen, speaking to BBC World News. They understood how to blend into the digital ecosystem of global trade. Federal prosecutors, citing the Foreign Narcotics Kingpin Designation Act, are now pursuing criminal charges against at least 9 companies, 5 based in China, 2 in Singapore, and 2 in Mexico. Meanwhile, the containers themselves were transferred to a secure testing range in Nevada, where controlled neutralization was conducted using thermal oxidation units to prevent environmental contamination. From a strategic standpoint, the operation highlighted a major weakness in Western port defense's dependence on digital data integrity. As the U.S. increases automation and AI-driven cargo processing, cyber-manipulated shipping manifests pose as great a threat as physical smuggling. The Brookings Institution's 2025 Maritime Security Report warned that a single compromised logistics node could funnel hundreds of high-risk shipments through legitimate trade channels before detection. The Trump administration has since accelerated funding for a new AI-driven cargo analytics platform under DHS supervision. Known as Project Sea-Watch, it integrates live data from over 300 global ports using machine learning to detect anomalies in chemical shipment patterns. Early results have already flagged multiple high-risk routes, including new transit points through Kenya's Mombasa and Turkey's Iskenderun port, both increasingly exploited as relay hubs. Yet despite technological advances, the human factor remains indispensable. ICE field agents, many of them veterans of Middle Eastern conflict zones, continued to lead physical inspections at great risk. Chemical interdiction is not glamorous. It's warfare in lab coats, said one senior officer during an interview with DW. Every mislabeled container could be a bomb waiting to detonate or a supply chain for addiction. But as the dust settles, a haunting question persists. If this much chemical mass can pass so close to America's heartland before discovery, what might the next infiltration look like, and from where will it come? The Houston interception not only exposed a criminal enterprise, it underscored the fragile intersection between trade security, foreign policy, and national defense. The Trump administration has characterized synthetic narcotics trafficking as a chemical sovereignty crisis, arguing that the deliberate flooding of U.S. markets with foreign-sourced precursors poses a strategic threat equivalent to biological warfare. At a press conference in July 2025, the president announced new sanctions targeting Chinese chemical exporters and logistics intermediaries linked to the Sinaloa network, expanding the use of economic pressure tools normally reserved for state adversaries. A Reuters analysis revealed that Washington is also pressing Mexico to allow U.S. special task forces to operate more freely near suspected super lab zones under bilateral security accords renewed earlier this year. The new cooperation framework mirrors NATO-style intelligence, sharing an extraordinary move considering the domestic sensitivity in Mexico regarding U.S. enforcement presence. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum publicly acknowledged expanded operational coordination, but insisted that sovereignty will not be compromised. The implications extend beyond North America. European and Asian intelligence services have quietly joined the data-sharing system under Operation Deep Harbor after similar chemical infiltrations were detected at Rotterdam, Hamburg, and Singapore. What we are witnessing is the globalization of narco-industrial logistics, said Dr. Marcus Riedel, a senior analyst at the German Institute for International and Security Affairs, SWP. Cartels have achieved what even some sanctioned states cannot: a shadow economy that spans oceans. Experts warn that these chemical flows may also intersect with geopolitical tensions. Western security officials, citing reports from Jane's Defense Weekly, suspect that Russian and Iranian proxy networks have been offering transport or laundering services to cartels in exchange for hard currency and smuggling routes. This convergence of organized crime and sanctioned state logistics mirrors hybrid warfare tactics using non-state actors to weaken adversaries indirectly. For the US, this raises an uncomfortable question. Can traditional law enforcement handle a threat that operates on the scale of global industry and geopolitical manipulation? Trump's National Security Council is reportedly considering designating certain cartels as transnational hostile entities, a classification that would allow limited use of military cyber and intelligence assets against their digital infrastructure. The proposal, still debated within Congress, reflects the growing belief that cartel supply networks have crossed into the realm of national security threats. Domestically, however, the challenge remains balancing port efficiency with security. As The Guardian reported in August 2025, several American trade associations warned that heightened inspections could slow imports and raise inflation in consumer goods. Yet DHS officials argue that economic risk is secondary to safeguarding American lives from what they now term mass chemical infiltration. This confrontation between trade and security commerce versus control defines the new battleground. The West's open markets have become both its greatest strength and its deepest vulnerability. You can't secure what you don't inspect, said retired Coast Guard Commander Daniel Ross. But you also can't inspect 10 million containers a year without crippling the system. As the United States confronts this dilemma, one strategic truth is becoming clear: the chemical war no longer belongs solely to the drug cartels. It has become a test of the West's ability to defend its own industrial bloodstream. If the war on synthetic drugs has entered an industrial era, the question now is how far this escalation will go and how the United States will adapt. Intelligence officials warn that cartels are already preparing their next move: diversification. Instead of relying solely on chemical precursors, they are shifting toward dual-use compounds that fall into regulatory gray zones. These substances, such as acetone derivatives, bromine compounds, and advanced lab reagents, have legitimate commercial applications, making them far harder to restrict or monitor without disrupting global industry. According to DW's September 2025 report, cartel chemists are now experimenting with alternative synthesis pathways that bypass traditional precursors entirely. This innovation is driven by growing pressure from Trump's Chemical Sovereignty Act, which expands the DEA's authority to blacklist foreign companies suspected of facilitating narcotics trade. In response, traffickers are investing in R&D teams across Latin America and Southeast Asia to develop new compounds that mimic methamphetamine's neurological effects while evading detection by existing field tests. A DHS white paper leaked to The Guardian revealed that these emerging designer precursors could become a nightmare for law enforcement. Traditional interdiction relies on identifying banned substances by molecular structure, but if cartels continually alter chemical formulas, the battle becomes a race against innovation, one where enforcement is always a step behind. It's chemical chess, said Dr. William Howe, a counterproliferation expert at King's College London, and the cartels have more money, fewer rules, and faster laboratories. Beyond science, the cartel's adaptation strategy also involves technology. Reuters recently documented how traffickers use AI-powered logistics platforms to track container movements, adjusting shipping routes in real time to avoid high-risk inspections. Satellite networks and commercial drone fleets, once tools of state surveillance, are now being exploited by organized crime for reconnaissance on port activity. It's a form of asymmetric warfare that doesn't require armies, just algorithms. For Washington, these revelations are forcing a shift in doctrine. Homeland Security officials propose treating the chemical supply chain as a critical defense asset akin to cyber infrastructure or energy grids. NATO intelligence forums have also discussed the threat in closed sessions with European partners, warning that similar infiltration attempts may already be targeting Mediterranean ports. The battlefield has moved from deserts and jungles to databases and shipping manifests, said Admiral James Parker during a Defense News interview in late August. We are not fighting traffickers anymore. We are fighting transnational engineers. Still, despite rising pressure, public fatigue looms large. After decades of the so-called war on drugs, some policymakers question whether escalating enforcement can truly solve a problem rooted in demand and global inequality. Yet few deny that the stakes have never been higher. If synthetic narcotics continue to blend with legitimate commerce, the West risks losing control of its own economic arteries. As the US tightens its grip on maritime and digital borders, cartels will evolve, nations will trade accusations, and technology will keep rewriting the rules. The next major chemical seizure might not happen in Houston, it could be Rotterdam, Vancouver, or Los Angeles. And when it does, the world will face the same haunting question: has the age of chemical warfare already begun, and will the West be ready to fight it? The 2025 Houston seizure exposed a sprawling Chinese Sinaloa network that redefined narcotics trafficking into an industrial transnational operation. Through falsified manifests, shell corporations, and cyber infiltration of shipping systems, 50,000 kilograms of meth precursors nearly entered the US supply chain, enough to trigger a national security crisis. Investigations showed how cartels now import industrial capacity building super labs across the American Southwest. Operation Chemical Shield and its successors uncovered systemic vulnerabilities in maritime trade and digital logistics. Trump's administration responded with sweeping port security upgrades, sanctions on Chinese exporters, and expanded intelligence sharing frameworks with Mexico and NATO allies. Yet as technology advances, traffickers are moving towards synthetic alternatives and AI-driven logistics, blurring the lines between organized crime economic warfare and state-enabled shadow economies. The result is a new form of conflict, one fought not on battlefields, but across databases, laboratories, and container yards. The question that remains: can the West defend its industrial lifelines without crippling global commerce?